All right, so this lecture is on chapter 13, the mass communication research eras. I'm going to dive right in and talk primarily about the statement that was made in the chapter with relative to our author, Stanley Baran. He says that media do have effects. Now, to what extent is the question? We attempt to understand and explain these effects through mass communication theory or theories that are discussed in this chapter. And it's all oftentimes based on individual differences. So let's start with the history and development of mass communication theory through the four eras that are mentioned in the text. And no, I'm not talking about this era's tour. However, the culture that we currently live in definitely impacts whether or not the theories that we are going to discuss in each of the eras do resonate and they still are valid in today's world. So these are the four eras of mass communication research that we'll focus on. The eras of mass society from 1900 to 1938, the era of limited effects from 1938 till 1960, and then the eras of cultural theory, which exist within a world that is changing from a social perspective in the 1960s and 70s, and then the meaning making perspective from 1975 until today. So I hope you're excited as much as Taylor Swift is. We're going to dive right into the eras of mass society theory in the 1900s through 1938. Mass communication is in its centennial. It's a very short, sort of young theory or social behavioral science, as you would say. And the theories that have evolved since 100 years have really arrived from just how humans have changed their lifestyle and how society has changed, and then the impact of technology, of course. So prior to the 1800s, most of us lived in rural communities without the industrialization era yet to be in a full existence. Now, people were primarily influenced by the church, family, friends, any social groups that they were tied to were indeed their sort of opinion leaders. They were their town criers, the people that they trusted to get information about the external world that they lived in. Now, shortly after that, in this time period, we began to see the evolution and the development of capitalism as an economic model and framework, and people began to migrate in to the United States and continue to migrate over to the New World. As you can see here, this is a picture of Ellis Island, and it's just an iconic way to symbolize how the country, especially in the Western nations, were beginning to become overpopulated, and people were moving away from rural towns and to cities. And to say all that is to mean that when you move to a large metropolitan area from a rural community, you are more dependent on mass media to receive your information. News and entertainment began to be this new industry. Mass media began to thrive in these major cities, and that's where people would receive their information from. Prior to, they received it from their rural community social networks. Now, these are just some examples of how people began to learn about their world through mass media, and typically they receive their information, as mentioned in the text, from this unknown they, which was the media. So by the end of the 19th century, people felt that their community was being replaced by this mysterious they or them known as the media. Primarily newspapers, print media was thriving at this time. The printing press was already in existence in the 1800s and began to thrive as an industry funded by primarily advertising and subscription-based models that we still see today. So I say all that to give you this first era of mass society, in that the earliest research and the earliest studies and the earliest hypotheses were that people were heavily influenced by media. This is something known as media being a magic bullet. And so this coined the term the magic bullet theory, or the hypodermic needle theory, that is mentioned in this early era, that people were seen as quite gullible and quite influential. So that gave rise to the development of war propaganda, as you can see here, not just through the Allied, but also in the Axis powers um, front of information that was being used and distributed on a mass scale to influence their societies to support the war. So fears that media messages would have strong direct effects on the audience members is what characterizes this era. As you can see here, some more additional war propaganda examples that are print-based and people were influenced by them. Also gives rise to the radio waves and the use of those to influence their particular societies and their nations to back the war. It was also commissioned by the War Department in the United States to create a 5-film series by Frank Capra, who was a prominent Hollywood director, and it is known that in these 7 series films, these information films were used to galvanize support for the war and to get our army to back this in an ideological standpoint to ensure that the troops were well prepared and well motivated to fight in this world war. So in this era, the research that was conducted by Paul Lazarsfeld and Walter Lippmann showed that there were, not dramatic, but predictable or consistent effects of mass media messages. And researchers began to focus more on limited and indirect effects of these messages as we exit this era of mass society and into what is known as the limited effects era. So the research that was done during this period helped to not necessarily validate that media was extremely powerful, but it could be. It just depended on individual differences. So we enter the era of limited effects in 1938 through about the 1960s. And one of the major prominent storylines to help get people to understand that media wasn't as powerful as we thought was that in this particular time period, there was a radio show that was aired on the radio. And primarily this was done without any disclaimers. And because disclaimers didn't exist, the FCC didn't require those before this event, but it was a fake radio war story that stirs terror throughout the United States, as you can see the headline here. But basically what it was a radio broadcast that was produced, and basically the story was that we were being invaded by aliens or Martians, and people in the local area, some of them freaked out about it, but a lot of people didn't. So this just gives more support to what is known as the limited effects era, knowing that people, can be influenced or persuaded, but not everyone is. Now, what also helps to validate this standpoint is that, researchers began to do empirical observational evidence. They would go out and see, they would do polling, and they would do what's called quantitative research. So they would gather statistics through these polls, and they would ask people and have a big sample study. It's kind of like how we get polls today. It's just a study of public opinion, and it's a study of how humans reacted to their media. So again, these are just some ways in which we began to develop the research methods in the social sciences, particularly with researching mass communication effects. Another study that came out in the 1940 presidential election was the study of the people's choice. And this is what created the two-step flow model. And this is a theory that is still used today. And primarily what happens is you have a person who is highly interested in a certain topic who is serving as your opinion leader. Now, it's easy to receive this idea because primarily what we do on social media is we follow other people. And so the opinion leaders today might be known as your influencers, and we are just sort of following what their opinions are, and we maybe sometimes support those opinions. That's why we follow that person, i.e. reinforcement theory. And so what we typically will do is trust that person with information that is coming from an external source that they have tapped into, which is known as the mass media. So that's two-step flow theory, and how it also helps to really emphasize that media has a limited effect. Now, it doesn't move us away from the funding of what is temporarily known as the war propaganda of the 1930s and 40s, but Hollywood is still in synergy with the federal government. Oftentimes, they have to get approval for films like these, which have a little bit more subtleness to them, but they're still considered by many in the field as propaganda, and it can have a limited effect. So they still utilize these techniques to galvanize people's support for military might. So, in short, everyone has been socialized differently because of our perceptions being selective. Our responses to media messages will vary as well. And this is something that is referred to as dissonance theory, where we have this sort of cognitive dissonance operating within our mindset as human beings. And so we'll tend to move towards particular media that will already be in alignment with our values, beliefs, and so forth. So more on that in the chapter. I'll just keep that short here today. And so this is just an emphasis of what is known as dissonance theory, but also a reinforcement manner, where again, we have a selective perception that has been built by the time that we reach middle teenage age or young adult age, where we begin to select specific content that we hope to see and that we hope we already agree with. And so this helps to reinforce our beliefs and values. And as you can see, there's step 2 and 3, which really just give us a sense of, all right, well, I'm going to put more attention towards these particular type of content that I already agree with. My prior beliefs help to drive that process. My expectations about what I'm going to see will tend to keep me on that particular type of content. And then number 3 is motivational factors. Helps us to keep coming back to that kind of content and to help emphasize and reinforce our selective perception about the world or the topics that we discuss together. Another really cool, interesting way to do this or think about this is that there's 2 images here, one of an old lady and a young lady. And depending on our perception of how we see things or how we frame things in our minds, we'll tend to see one or the other first. Same with this other photo here. Now, moving on to the third era, which is kind of more modern, is the era of critical and cultural theory. Now, lots of social change is happening in this decade and a half. And so Stanley Baran talks about meaning and therefore the effects that we experience as researchers are negotiated by media and audiences as they interact with the culture. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of what we see on the screen in the 1960s. And these are some of the first images of war from Vietnam. And so that sparks a lot of outrage, social change, not just with the anti-war movement, but also with civil rights. And so these are some of the first images that we see of war and of discrimination on our television screens. So society is taking a really paying a lot of close attention to what is happening in the country. And so that's what drives us into this new era of critical thinking and critical cultural studies, where we begin to challenge our media and we begin to characterize it in such a way like mediatization theory, which basically challenges this idea that media is indeed powerful. Yes, it impacts some people, but we're also going to criticize it because all of the things that are being broadcasted about are, and this was what mediatization theory argues, is that it's being shaped in a way to fit a social practice, right? And it's been altered to accommodate the media coverage around that. You see this with court cases. You see this with sporting events. And you also see it with politics. So this is a great theory to read deep about, and it helps to characterize this new era of critical cultural studies in mass communication research. Here's a prime example of how we've mediatized the sporting event of the Super Bowl. 54% of what you're watching within a 3-hour and 32-minute span time is not even the game being played. It's unbranded replays, it's field shots, it's crowd shots. And now what we're also seeing is advertisements as well. separate from the commercials. You start to see them inside the game. And this is where we tie this with hyper commercialism and really just starting to see the media and pick it apart for what it really is. And what it is, it's a moneymaker, right? It's a way to grab your attention and sell you advertisements and products and services. So mediatization is definitely a great critical cultural type of theory that we developed in this era. And then last, we get to the era of meaning making. And this is a little bit more contemporary because we are now thinking about ourselves as not just these gullible, hyper influence type of creatures, but rather the research shows that we have limited effects. You know, media does affect some people, but not everybody all the time. And then into this idea of, hey, we want to criticize our media, we want to take ownership of it. And the era of meaning making really helps to establish that the audience is much more active and they are engaged. And we're the ones doing things to media and adding to the content, especially now that we are content creators and able to dip our influence and perspectives into what other people see. So the meaning making perspective is all about asking people by interviews, you know, what did you think about this media? How do you use this YouTube channel to help you in your everyday needs? There's a lot of cool studies that are done that have a much different way of thinking about us as human beings and how we are active audience members. We're the ones that get to decide what a certain symbol means. We create meaning behind that through our interactions. That's what symbolic interaction is all about. So the meaning making era also allows us to take a step back and realize what the media might be doing at a bigger scale in society and why it's perhaps designed that way. So other theories like cultivation theory help to establish that as well. So within each era, there are certain theories that stick out. And the chapter talks a lot about these theories, but they all usually will find themselves being shaped by the world around them during that particular time. So the era of mass society, the limited effects, cultural theory, and then the meaning-making perspective all help to illustrate that at the very beginning, we knew not a whole lot. We just made a big assumption that media was extremely powerful on everyone. But as we rolled through the century, we realized that we need to take a much closer look as to whether or not media is affecting human beings and to what extent. Thanks for watching, and I hope this video was helpful to you as you go about your studies in mass communication. Take care.